Speaking of radical accountability, I mean, the rabbi and I always talk about courage and civility are two of the hardest parts of ethics. Something that you two gentlemen talked about the other day, I'm going to ask you to address. You addressed the issue of the LGBTQ plus elemental P is how I call it when I talk to all my friends who keep adding letters. You and the rabbi being an Orthodox Jewish rabbi. And of course, you have radically different worldviews, and you both are very accountable. So, gentlemen, I want you to do what you said, what you've talked about before, which I loved how you did it. A civil conversation about foundational differences. Ready, set, go.
Well, if you don't mind, Scott, I'd like to make 2 points, and bear with me. I believe that there is a God who created the universe, who revealed his will at Sinai, and who holds us accountable for understanding and adhering to his will. This is not a belief I was raised with. I had no profound theological beliefs until I'd finished college, had done quite a bit of traveling, and I came to the beliefs that I now hold through logic, through study, through empirical evidence. I believe what I believe because I believe it is true. And it's not a leap of faith, it's a belief that I reached through reason. So when the Torah, when the Bible tells me something as an expression of God's will, I assume that God knows more than I do, that he's smarter than I am, and that he's wiser than I am. And so if there's something in his word that I don't understand, I assume the problem is with me and my understanding, not with him. Even if it may be difficult to grasp, even if it may make me or others feel uncomfortable. And I want to apologize for this, because I think this is foundational. And so when the Torah says, a man will not lie with a man, there's really no way around that. Second point, however, is that we live in a world where values, where beliefs that were once almost universal are now wildly diverse. And people grow up with all kinds of ideas, values, philosophies, influences. And we are, to a large extent, products of our environment, products of our experience. And traditional religion, traditional values is, they are in some cases under attack, in some cases not fashionable, and humanism, egalitarianism, open-mindedness, these have become values that have been elevated to the level of religion. So I can understand how good, sincere, well-meaning, intentioned people like yourself will come to beliefs that are polar from mine. And I don't have to compromise my beliefs to recognize that you are a person of integrity and sincerity, and that you truly believe in your own values. And that gives us common ground that we can be respectful to each other, that we can sit and talk and have a conversation, that we can feel a sense of partnership and kinship and friendship. One of the words we've talked about in the past is compartmentalization. It's a human defense mechanism where I've got one idea over here and one idea over here, and I can't let them get too close to each other because they don't play nicely together. And that's okay. And just dealing with this tension, managing, it's not going to go away, but managing it, dealing with it, there are ways that we can have a civil and a healthy and in many ways a loving society, even with people who have very, very different foundational beliefs.
Scott?
Your witness, sir.
So much richness in everything that you say. We could be talking all afternoon.
We really
Heaven
could.
knows we ever do a live podcast where we all are in the same room. The podcast will probably never end. It'll be an eternal, it will be our own version of eternal life. It's interesting. I, like you, I actually grew up in a conservative Christian tradition. Fire and brimstone at church, hell, 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 all this sort of stuff. Then I moved away from it. As I mentioned earlier, I went through a period, although I'll go into more detail about it right now because it's relevant. I actually went through a period where I was stone cold, hard. I would even say borderline, although quietly, militantly atheistic. When I said earlier, I didn't believe I had a soul, I meant it. I didn't think anyone had a soul, but I didn't have a soul. And those who believed they had a soul or a spirit, that was nice. I viewed you as someone that had psychological needs and you were weak. That's honestly how I viewed it. I have since, through a process, perhaps not so far unlike what the rabbi just described, lived experience, come to a very, very different place. I do believe I have a soul. And believing that, by the way, was one of the most transformative events in my life. And if someday we ever have a conversation about what it feels like to understand and believe you have a soul when you thought you had none,
I welcome that.
But we'll need some Kleenex that day. I will say that with that has come a commonality that I have with the rabbi, and that is that there is a larger universal force. I call it providence. Some might call it the cosmos of the universe. Some might even call it God. That is beyond our ability to imagine. If there is anything that I think about or any visual that I use to represent my knowledge space in the universe, I view myself as on a cliff. Very steep, but in front of me, a massive ocean. And the very edge of that cliff is all of the knowledge that I've accumulated in my life. And that ocean, which goes beyond and beyond and beyond, is everything there isn't to know. And by the way, that ocean is of infinite deepness. That, I would suspect, the rabbi and I have in common. We also, based on what I just heard, have a respect for facts, logic, and reason. Why do I raise all of that? Because irrespective of our beliefs about any particular point of view, and by the way, that includes those that strike most deeply at our heart, there are human elements of commonality. Now, not everyone believes we have souls, but I'm sure that person and I could find different things in common. But in this case, we have the commonality of some sort of belief in a larger force that's manifesting itself in the universe and that we are all part of and that's bigger than each of us. So if we're willing to acknowledge our common humanity, then it is, I believe, incumbent upon us to recognize it and respect it. There are some places a dialogue I have with you about fundamental human rights will not go. I may not like a certain group that's not hurting anyone. I may not believe a thing they have to say. I may think that they are completely ridiculous. I do not believe in genocide against them. I do not believe in persecuting them and depriving them of fundamental human liberties. Those are lines that I will draw. However, that doesn't mean that there's not openness to persuasion around the common humanity. I agree. We are in the comfort box of safety around conversation to our own detriment. Because what it does is it divides our humanity. It says some of us are us, some are others. And inevitably, words aside, the human condition is such that we prioritize us over them. So there's a hierarchy that automatically occurs within our humanity. And I do not believe any creative force in this universe would create human beings with the ability to think, all of whom, by the way, could be thinking that they're the favored ones, looking others down, and then just randomly pick one group to be right or the ones that are better. So I laid that as a foundational set of beliefs that I have right now. We live in a pluralistic world. That's the reality. Not everyone is going to agree with me about everything. And if you personalize every single belief, if I personalize every single belief, I'm going to run around not able to do anything because I'm going to be so wounded. No one agrees with you about everything. And honestly, sometimes the more personal those disagreements are, the stronger of an imperative I have to depersonalize them, so long as, again, they're not based in just, you're not even a human being, which I'm not hearing here. I actually agree with you about the biblical or the Torah language. It's pretty clear. It says what it says. There are those that make arguments, oh, this was about a different time, or it was talking about a particular sort of relationship between men, or it doesn't mention lesbians, so that doesn't count, all that sort of stuff. The language was what it was. It's very difficult to get around. However, that doesn't mean I have to accept it. That doesn't mean that I have to reject you for accepting it. Everyone doesn't have to agree with me. Everyone doesn't even have to like me. We could hate each other and still have great conversations and show respect. That's how society moves forward. I mentioned earlier, creative collisions, hard, difficult conversations. Those conversations, those collisions are not going to happen if we all agree. I view this as an exercise in my ability to hear things and consider and sharpen my own reasoning. If I'm to be perfectly honest, I couldn't sit back and don't believe in smugly sitting back and saying, well, I'm gay and that's who I am. And anyone who says that that's wrong, well, they just don't understand. No, I actually need to consider, are my fundamental belief systems about everything right? Everything. Am I really being honest with myself when I say I'm born this way? God wouldn't have made me, or the providence wouldn't have put this way if it didn't want me to be that way. If I'm not having that question, especially by someone who intellectually I respect it all, then that belief means nothing. A belief that means nothing and hasn't been tested ain't worth having. A relationship that doesn't test and challenge me isn't one worth having. I treasure this disagreement, and I don't have a problem with it. I would much rather honesty occur between us that can deepen the relationship and figure out how we can navigate that than the rabbi just pretending to say what he thinks everyone else wants to hear. There's been a lot of destruction in our society. I think a lot of racism and ugliness is coming out in our society in a way that's particularly toxic because people feel that they haven't had the space to honestly process how they're feeling. So they have to walk around saying this, that, and the other that they're supposed to say. And in the minute someone gives them permission to say something, the bile that's built up and fermented, boom, it blows up. And it's a lot uglier than it could have been if we would have just been willing to share the foundational beliefs and have conversations from there.
Powerful for both of you.